fructus ventris sui, Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Ave, Ave Maria,
Ancestors, Great Spirit, we come to you today, Chartres community, in the spirit of rhetorica. We put our hearts and minds. Wind sweeps across a frozen landscape, rustling dried reeds on the shoreline that erupt into sound. Music to quicken and awaken life on the planet. May our voices, may our conversations be like that. Pandemic, suffering, death. Let the song that unifies, that purifies, that brings peace, restores trust, wholeness, and love move through us like the wind in the reeds, that again we might be free from illness and disease and step forward into the new time. We greet you, Rhetorica, and anticipate your lessons and your love. Amama Ua Noa.
Hello, everyone. As we gather today, Jupiter is rising, and Jupiter here where I am anyway, in Chartres. And Jupiter is the gift of the ability to expand, to breathe out into the world, and is connected to our ability to inspire other people, to be God-filled, which is one way to think about rhetorica. Rhetorica is our ability through speech to bring in the beauty of the world. I don't know what your summer's been like, but one of the things that's going on in the sky right now is that all the outer planets are retrograde. From Jupiter, Saturn, Chiron, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And these are all the collective planets. They're all the planets outside the sphere of individual experience and individual life. And when these planets are retrograde, it's almost as if our collective experience is pulling us back. And of course, we've gone back 20 years yesterday in the memory of 9/11, which Jim will talk to us about. But we haven't been able to move forward this summer completely. There's this process that all of us are in everywhere, not just in California or New York or Paris or London, but there's this process where we're asked to review. We're not free to move forward into the new just yet. One other thing is that the moon today, as we speak, is almost exactly conjunct the south node of the moon. And the south node of the moon is said to have to do with our habit patterns, the old way of doing things, old beliefs. And in the astrological tradition, it was considered in its fall, the south node here. And it's in Sagittarius. And in the images of it, the archer looked backwards and shot a monster coming out of his own tail. So we can think of this moment that we're looking back at our own monsters on some ways. And this is a necessary process before we can move forward into new territory. The retrograde planets will begin to move forward in October, in the middle of October, but really you could say about the 12th and 19th of October, we'll start to have some forward movements, but it's not till the end of the year that everything is in new territory. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Lynn, so much for that. I'll have much more to say on the retrograde nature of our outer planets in a bit here. And Apila and Ruth, thank you for your invocation and your musical opening. It's so deeply satisfying to me month after month to listen to all three of you as we do every year in Chartres when we gather there, as we open sacred space together over the 7 days of our initiatory process, which we've been doing now for some 16 years. We did virtually this year, and if the gods are beneficent, we will meet in person in Chartres in July of 2022. But today, as Lynn noted, we're in a retrograde remembering that was consecrated yesterday around the world of the 20th anniversary of 9/11. It was an event that, of course, happened in the United States, but it was one of those events that happened globally for all of us in one way or another, as Al-Qaeda mobilized an unprecedented attack on US soil, sending airplanes hijacked into both of the World Trade Towers, into the Pentagon, and there was a fourth airplane that crash landed in Pennsylvania that was headed directly to Washington, probably to the Capitol building or to the White House. If that last airplane had hit its target, the devastation would have been unimaginable to what was then and now the greatest power on earth, as a band of a few hundred guerrilla fighters in far off Middle East and Afghanistan mobilized an attack that stopped the world and initiated two things that are with us to the present day. One is the war on terror that led to invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq. but more fundamentally, in which virtually every government around the world has participated. 9/11 began the occasion where governments began to systematically institute national security states. Widespread surveillance, arrests without habeas corpus, detainment without trial, and it really initiated the rise that we see very palpably around us in country after country of the rise of the national security state. So 9/11, 20 years on, is still a very poignant, particularly given the fact that in the last 30 days, the United States so chaotically and ignominiously withdrew from Afghanistan, and Al-Qaeda is now stronger today and in more countries than it was in 9/11. So it's a time for all of us to think deeply about history and about how we have either observed this history or participated proactively in trying to do something of good as we've been surrounded by the war on terror and the rise of the national security state. So we begin the program today at a rather somber note, but also, as we'll discuss as the hour transpires, rich with opportunities. This is an extraordinary time of opportunities because the deeper the crisis, the greater the opportunity. And that's what Ubiquity University, Humanity Rising, and now the Global Regeneration Corps that's emerging is dedicated toward. So let us remember 9/11. In our program today, we're going to start with a commemoration by Ruth. She'll sing to a poem to the trees that her sister wrote shortly after 9/11 as just our way to commemorate that immense historical occasion. And then we want to hear from, I would say, the faculty, from Apila, from Ruth, from Banafsheh, from Lynn, about the summer courses. We had Dialectica in July, and then we had the Journey to South India with Andrew in late July. And then we had Madonna Rising in mid-August. Those were our trilogy of summer courses. So as we always do every September, we take a few minutes and just remember. So if any of you want to have anything to say, just raise your hands, put something in the chat box, and we'll recognize you. And then after that discussion is complete, we will hear from Banafsheh about the rose circles that are coming up. The next rose circle is on the equinox on the 22nd, I believe it is, of September. And then I'm going to say a few things about some courses that are coming up. But I also want to give some updates about the Global Regeneration Corps, because there's some very dynamic aspects to what's happening in our world. We are now in Code Red. It's very interesting that almost coterminous with the 20th anniversary of 9/11, the Secretary General of the United Nations said that we are now in Code Red for climate change. And I'll be discussing what that means and the implications and what we can do about it later on in the program. But first, I turn it now over to Ruth. Ruth, sing us a commemoration that I want to hear from as many of you who are inclined about the summer programs and anything you want to say about 9/11 or anything that comes to mind for this community call. Ruth?
Okay. I actually was in New York when 9/11 happened, and first thing I did was try and figure out what can I do, and so I offered music at various places. I first went to a place on one of the piers that was serving the families, and somehow got in there to a massage area and was playing for people receiving massages. But one of the main things that I did was play at St. Paul's Chapel, which should have been destroyed but was not destroyed, and turned out to be a place of refuge for the people working there. So I went there twice a week from the end of September until May, and so it was a very sacred space there. So what I'm going to play now is a poem that my sister wrote shortly after 9/11. And Banafsheh, I think you can put up the poem now. And it's to trees. Let's see if I can get this going. So we both responded to it in the way we could. I played music and she wrote several poems, but this is one that I've done before. So here we go. The trees say to me, talk to us, we're here, we can hear. I sing to them of the suffering and chaos and harm. I ask forgiveness for my kind. I ask for help from theirs. I sit with my back against the great white swamp. She tells me what the trees know, what we must come to know. There is no separation in the deep place. All our roots connect across continents, oceans, time. We are held in one weave with the tiniest things, gnats and one-celled swimmers, with the hugest eagles and whales, mountains, waves. We drink the same rain, turn to the same light, sigh with the same wind, return to the same earth. All that is can gather us in, all that is can heal us if we remember, if we remember. The trees know, they want us to know, they know.
Thank you, Ruth. It's a comforting thought that the trees know, and they want us to know that they know. And Elizabeth Austin just put in the chat, everyone, that there was a survivor tree, a calorie pear, a tree at ground zero that survived. That's an extraordinary thing, and a beautiful image of the World Trade Centers coming crashing down and a lone pear tree still standing. It's a beautiful thought, beautiful image. So thank you, Ruth. Why don't we open it up now? And for those of you who would like to make a comment on any of the summer courses or 9/11 or anything that you feel led to share. But Lynn or Apila, Banafshe, Ruth, I noticed there, Ann Baring's with us today. I would love to hear from some of the faculty as we start our discussion today about anything that any of you would like to share about our summer courses or about 9/11.
Well, quiet.
So Roz Bound, Banafshe, if you could open Roz's video, that would be kind.
Anything good?
Roz, go ahead.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I just wanted to say that we were at the first Chartres in 2006 with you, Jim, and Apila and Carolyn and Bob and a wonderful group of people, and we were so honored to attend this year. Being 80, I can't remember all of it now to comment on it, but it was a wonderful few days, and we felt it was very intimate, and we felt absolutely included, and it was absolutely lovely to listen to you all again and to be able to join in some cases. So thank you so much for offering it virtually and making it possible. Love you all.
Thank you, Roz. Any comment that you would like to make on the 20th anniversary of 9/11?
Yes, we've been watching quite a bit about it recently, and it's brought back all the memories. On that day, I was teaching, and we didn't have a television in our small campus. And so it wasn't until 5 o'clock at night that I saw anything. I just heard about it, heard snippets from the radio, and took those snippets to my adult students. And we talked quietly through the day, but we didn't see it. We didn't get that drama until I went back home at the end of the day and sat there and turned it on. And it was quite staggering. My voice is shaking now just thinking about it. But all the heroes that came from there, we've been seeing a lot of that lately, all the wonderful heroes that were so fantastic. And the world has changed since then, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Roz.
Thanks, Jim.
I'll tell one story from when I was playing there. There was a bunch of people just improvising, and it was fairly jolly music. And I looked over and saw somebody was, family members would come, people would come and sleep. And I looked over, I thought, well, maybe I should, shift the energy to play for that person. And just as I was thinking that, a man came in off the pile and heard, that's what they called it out there, and heard our music and just did a dance down the aisle. And so it was just like, everything is in order here. You know, it's like, I think I'm going to be playing for someone, but no, the music we were playing was absolutely perfect at that time. And St. Paul's was filled with children's drawings and banners made by children from all over the country. And it was really quite a very thin and sacred and beautiful space to be playing music in. And they had the forethought to have live music there for people 3 times or 2 times a day.
It's amazing. That's amazing. Anne Baring has her hand up. Anne, would love to have you share.
Well, I have a different memory. I'm very moved by what other people have just said, but I remember sending a message to other Jungian analysts saying this is the moment when we could reverse the whole militaristic trend. We need not take revenge for what has happened, terrible as it is. This is an absolutely prime opportunity. It says join as a panelist.
Yeah, you're on. Oh, and you turned yourself off, so you're now unmuted, so your voice is clear.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I'm back again. But yes, as I said, it was a terrible, terrible shock, obviously, and horrific images which we saw from England. But I remember thinking they must not take revenge on this. They must not go the old path. If they can only break the pattern and speak about reconciliation and speak about brotherhood and admit the terrible things that everything has, that has been done on both sides, but stop the whole military industrial complex in its tracks. I remember this is what the message I sent to all the Jungian people that I knew at that time. And they were too shocked really to reply. And probably this was a shocking thing to think, but nevertheless, I think it has validity because this was the opening, cosmic opening, if you like, when we could have changed the pattern.
I think you're absolutely right. And the fact that we did not is an awful thing. And we've paid, the United States and the world, and particularly the Middle East, has paid an awful price for not taking the advice that you provided in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. So, Anne, you're absolutely correct. Absolutely.
But it's a great sadness that all this terrible thing had 20 years of mistaken war and death, more endless slaughter. Even now in Afghanistan, people are being murdered by the Taliban because of us, really. And this is something we really, really have to look at, I think, as the West, not just America, but England also, and all the other NATO countries involved. Anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, and so much. It was a path not taken. We have Lynn and then Apila. Lynn, please.
Okay. Well, bouncing off of Anne a little bit. From an astrological perspective, I remember that a month before 9/11 happened, I was teaching with a colleague in some chateau in France somewhere, and we were talking about there was an opposition between Saturn and Pluto. So it's the same cycle, the same 2 planets that conjuncted, came together at the beginning of 2020, were in opposition in 2001. And I mean, there's been a lot written about this by the astrological community, but we kept saying, you know, we see structures coming down, you know, like we have no idea what was going to happen, of course, but there is something about when you enter an archetype, an archetypal moment in the history of the world. And I'd be really curious if your take on this, because reading Ion and Jung, the way Jung talks about evil, all right, and even this idea that there's this connection between the divine that leads us to the shadow side in human beings, which became so apparent looking again at those images of the planes crashing into the tower. And a lot has been said, I think, about all the goodness, all the kind acts that were done in New York on the ground, all the help strangers gave at 9/11, the way that people came together and helped each other. But then this, and how much less energy it takes to destroy than to come together and do good. And we're in, to take it back to Saturn Pluto, which is about a time where the structures of our world go through some kind of major transformation. It's time to build things differently. I think you're absolutely right. It was a moment of possible awareness. And then a few months later, George Bush said, "You're either with us or against us." He split the world in two. And that phrase, "you're either with us or against us," has come to resonate. It's within the American psyche in particular, in a very powerful way, rather than we are all together, the world will come together. So with the pandemic, of course, we have another opportunity to split ourselves into light and shadow sides, or to find a way to come together again. So.
That's a profound point, Lynn. You know, George Bush split the world and created a dichotomy that led us inevitably into war. And it's that Saturn-Pluto opposition that he was sort of living out completely unconsciously that set the world in motion to the present day. Anne, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, I do have a comment, because what happened, what George Bush did was he split off the shadow. And that was the thing that he shouldn't have done. And in doing that, he polarized everything 100% more. And I thought, as I saw those phallic towers going down, sorry to say this, but this was the hubris of America not confronting its militaristic shadow, being taken down by the shadows of the Al-Qaeda, so to speak, who is the manifestation of the Western people's, Western alliance's shadow, which has endlessly gone into wars in order to increase its power, so to speak. So I saw the phallic shape of the towers as this hubris in the unconscious American psyche, who didn't realize that the Al-Qaeda was the exact manifestation of its unrecognized shadow. So that's pretty strong language, which I apologize for, but it's with insight, you know, one can see back. But I remember at the time thinking that and thinking what a terrible, terrible retribution has been taken by the shadow on us or on America because of its inability to control its own shadow.
Well, yes, you know, and I just watched over the last couple of days a Netflix documentary on 9/11 called Turning Point. And they made exactly that point that you're making. And they said one of the consequences of 9/11, when George Bush split the world, was we unleashed shadow content on the Middle East in unprecedented ways. first in Afghanistan and then in Iraq. But we also unleashed it in America through the Patriot Act and the construction of the National Security Act. We began to legitimate and, in fact, authorize all kinds of erosions of any kind of civil liberties in the name of the war on terror. So the fact that we split it off meant, as you're saying, we lost control of it and doubled and tripled its potency, both externally and internally. And 9/11 may go down as that moment when that demarcates in the history books of kind of the fall of the American imperium and the degradation of the American soul. Yeah, so that's a very, very profound point. Thank you so much. Apila, did you have a comment you would like to make?
Yes, I had. It happened that I was in New York a week or two after that happened, and I went to the site. And after I left the site, I ended up in a conversation that evening about what caused all of it. And the conversation went to political economic analysis, how we'd brought that on because of capitalism and what we're doing, the damage we're doing in the world through our shadow and so forth. And I was listening to all of that, and I had this feeling come over me. And the feeling that came over me was what it was like to stand there where all those souls left their mortal bodies in such a violent way. You remember bodies like jumping off the building to their death, and you could see the bodies falling on the news. And when I stood there, and it was still smoldering, there was like smoke and things in the ground, and there was just this silence that I can't find words for. Just the silence can be beautiful, but this silence is just empty, absolutely empty. And I just want to remember that as we're discussing it. I had a friend who was at the airport that day ready to take a flight. He was one of the heads of Ford Foundation, and witnessing what happened from the plane, he had a nervous breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to bring that home and think about all those people.
Mm.
Thank you.
Mm. Mm. Yes, yes. It was a shock. It was a shock to the world soul. And if you know the Global Coherence Pulse, they actually measured around 9/11, because they have these devices all over the planet measuring the electromagnetic field of the Earth. And on 9/11, it spiked as people all over the world went into kind of a shock at what had happened, so that event had a global impact on our psyche. And whether it's the project director of the Ford Foundation having a nervous breakdown just looking at the devastation from the air, there was a spasm of the psyche, the world soul, at that moment, in a very, very powerful way. That hasn't happened according to the testings and the calibrations since then. There was just this huge spike 20 years ago, yesterday, in the global pulse of our Earth. Any other comments from anyone? Juju, thank you, raising your hand. Please speak. Hello, Juju, your hand is open. You're on the screen. So you need to take yourself off mute. There you go. And if you could open your video, we can see you and hear what you have to say. I think she's coming from Asia somewhere, so not sure. How that's not happening. So let's go. Hello?
Maybe we can hear from Ann Waters.
Yeah, let's go to Ann Waters and then we'll circle back as usual. Ann, do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Uh-huh.
Yes, so I have much to say, but in a short form, I'll say that I also had a psychic nervous breakdown, and the next day I was supposed to fly to Chicago, but that's not what I wanted to say really. I went down to San Francisco. I live about 4 hours away, 5 times over the course of the next few years to all of the marches that were happening. And there were millions of us trying to stop the next war in Iraq. We knew that was happening next. And it was terrible with some of my friends arguing about Afghanistan. It was beautiful to be in the streets with so many millions of people who knew this was all a moment in time spoken to turn to peace and to turn to new ways of relating. And what did happen, the localization movement came out of 9/11 really. Within a few years we began meeting about how to localize our economies, how to create strength and resilience. We didn't have the word resilience back then, but how to strengthen our communities. And small farmers began to gather in our area here up in Mendocino County, and we got a huge upsurge of people learning how to be together in community. It was a very positive, powerful thing because we felt we were completely failed on the large government national levels, that we needed to begin to do things for ourselves. So if there was anything positive at all about 9/11, it was us recognizing our neighbors and coming together. The movement is having a lot of trouble now. We aren't getting together anymore, and it's sad. I run a community center here. I just want to say that the pandemic has caused so much separation, as we all know, that the community events just aren't happening. We did our winter solstice in the woods, in the redwoods last winter. We were able to get together, and we want something to happen to change this. But I just wanted to mention the localization movement, and everyone look around for Transition Town or begin to see how you can build community, because we need that now. It's harder to do, but it can still happen. Zoom is a great friend, even for your neighbor to Zoom in because they don't want to leave their house. So leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you so much. And then I think we'll round it off with Brenda Crowther. Then we'll turn to you, Banafsheh. Brenda, wonderful to have you join us.
Well, thank you, and hello, everyone. I was very interested in what you said about the magnetism of the Earth and what happened at 9/11. And perhaps I should, for the first time, tell you what happened to me at 9/11. I was moving house, and just at the moment that it happened, I phoned my solicitor to ask how it was going along. And he said, Brenda, put the phone down, put the television on. And he banged the phone down. And later I found out that the people were in the tower. But at the very moment that it happened, suddenly the voice of this man pushed me somewhere else. And I saw a huge, huge vision of the Earth. And from out of space, this huge figure, I would call it an anthropos, someone would call it a Christ, hit the earth with such force at the same time as the 9/11, and this figure entered into the earth. And at that moment, a huge change occurred in the earth. And that was the experience that I had at the same time as 9/11. And it made me reflect on what are the mysteries that are hidden underneath and behind violent events, and especially that the shadow contains something absolutely mysterious besides the evil. And so that's the first time I've shared that experience.
Mm. Just a quick question, Brenda. You know, when this anthropos figure entered the earth, kind of what happened, or was that just the end of your vision? Was there any?
Yes, it was the end of the vision, and I knew that the figure had entered into the earth, and almost materially, and that this was the beginning of a new era.
Wow. Wow.
And that you could say that I felt in my bones. But what Lynn would have to say about the astrological aspect, I don't know. But maybe there is a connection also with the pandemic, because we're passing through something. And I noticed in 2012 that all the dreams of my clients changed. And they changed from personal dreams to dreams concerning a wider vision of their life and the earth. There were no longer personal problems. And it was at that point that I realized that I had to deal with people less personally and more globally.
Mm. Mm. Well, thank you so much for that. Anne, do you have any comment? You're a fellow Jungian with Brenda. What would be your comment on her vision?
Well, I think that it's most interesting because, as she said, the shadow contains elements that we don't understand, great mysteries, and it is part of the creativity of life. So maybe this was something that compensating, if you like, the terrible events, but also reinforcing the need to recognize what the shadow is telling us about the way we've conducted ourselves in relation to the earth, which is what the pandemic is also doing. Mm. So I think that's a wonderful thing that Brenda has brought in here, because it gives us a different perspective on that whole event, which is very, very valuable and also very positive, not negative in the sense that I had put it, but positive, because it's redeeming.
It's possible that the earth perhaps needed some help, and this came in at that moment.
Well, you know, it's striking me, Brenda, Anne, and everyone, you know, it was one of our own students, Claudia Wells, who's now the chairwoman of the Institute for Ionic Sciences, who many years ago did her master's degree through our wisdom school on this global coherence pulse. And she was one of the ones who facilitated and funded some of these kind of listening devices. And maybe next time we could have Claudia come on our next community call on October 10th to talk about the global coherence pulse and some of the data that they've received. Because I've seen her presentations, and you can actually see the graphs on the day of 9/11 and the spike in the world energy. So Banafshe, that might be something we should consider for next month. I happen to be talking to Claudia this very next week, and we'll raise it with her. But I think that would be a fascinating thing. And then to have you back, Brenda, to share your vision again, and then anything anyone else, of course, wants to share, that could be a very interesting follow-on to our session today. So thank you for raising that. That's beautiful, beautiful image of the anthropos at the time of destruction, entering in to the world soul, to the earth herself, with a new energy.
Thank you.
You know, and Anne, I think your intuition around don't strike back. This is the time to turn the other cheek. This is the time for reconciliation. Probably was the impulse of the anthropos and the forces of goodness at that moment. And because that was a path not taken, the world, and particularly the United States, has paid an awful price for not taking the appropriate action. So,
but it was the most difficult thing that they could possibly be asked to do. I mean, it goes against the whole programming of the military psyche, if you like, or the warrior psyche, not to retaliate. But I was also thinking that we're all part of the earth. So the earth would have felt the shock of what had happened, and the need for reconciliation of these different opposing elements in itself would have been emphasized and brought up by this anthropos figure entering the earth. So it's all terribly interesting and fascinating what's coming up today, I think.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, we have one last hand. Kaylin, do you want to make a brief comment? Then we'll turn it over to Banafshe.
Oh, I just had a poem I was going to share that was written on one of the anniversaries.
Sure.
Passing travelers, wide awake in this darkness, we yearn for you still. Your footprints have disappeared. What are we to do? Our sleeves are new damp with tears, since all things must end. Ponder this world's restless ways. In this hour not late, will we spend time together? Floating bridge of dreams, stem this flow of gushing tears. Over mountain dawn, in cool calm of this fall day, pray to be loving. There is light in our gardens blooming everywhere, still shining where skies are clear. With a sound of wings, human shadows pass me by, precious budding wings now entirely clear of clouds. We shall not forget as your music circles earth. We will sing your souls to eternal existence. Though we remain here, we find our hearts infinite. Cosmos breathes rebirth. Return now to your true home.
Oh. Banafshe.
Oh, we've had such a rich sharing today. Thank you so much to everyone. I'm not going to take the time to talk about my experience of 9/11. I want to invite everyone to join us in the Rose Circle that we will have on Wednesday, September 22nd, on the fall equinox at 10 a.m. Pacific. We're going to take the opportunity to align ourselves with this very potent time of the year where the night and the day come into equal balance, so that we can bring balance to ourselves and restore balance to our world in this very polarizing time. We will be listening, receiving wisdom from our dear Anne Baring, and Peggy Rubin will sing with Ruth Cunningham, and we'll dance together, coming together as a community to observe the equinox and restore balance is the intention of our time. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Banafshé. I want to just pay a tribute to you and Anne and Peggy and Ruth for Madonna Rising. I went through all three of the courses, as you all know, and for me, that Madonna Rising was the most sublime. It was just an extraordinary session. Your lectures, Anne, were just so powerfully insightful, and Peggy's leading us in our collective imagination, as only Peggy Rubin can do. And Ruth, your music, and Banafshé, you are otherworldly in your capacity to embody beauty and tranquility and vitality. I just want to salute all four of you for just a wonderful grand finale to our summer programs. Dialectica was a beautiful event. It was a little, it was challenging for some people to really take in the subject matter around gender fluidity and the dialectic of our world, but it was very powerful in its own right. And then, of course, Andrew's tour de force in South India, as only Andrew Harvey can provide, was also sublime. So we had a powerful container, everyone. And as I've said so many times, that's the purpose of a mystery school, is to contain the prose, kind of the agony and the ecstasy of our world, with all of its chaos and discordant tonalities and strife, in a poetry, a mythopoetic container, which is ultimately about being held by the mother. And that's, I think, the power of Madonna Rising. And I think that's the power of our rose circles, is that we now need to be held by the mother. And to just take a minute, we have some amazing courses coming up. We have one around neuroplasticity and how we continue to shapeshift our minds and our brains, literally, as our circumstances unfold. We have a very interesting course on Hermann Hesse. His work, Damien and Siddhartha and Narcissus and Goldman, with one of the world's leading experts, Max Fischer, on Hesse, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, if you may recall, in 1921, toward Halloween. We have a journey into Damanhur with Esperide Ananas, who's one of the founders of Damanhur many years ago. We're going to go into a multi-dimensional virtual tour of the temples of humankind that are just carved out of the center of the mountain. For those of you who've been there, truly one of the wonders of the world. And then we have in December a course on Queen Boudica of ancient Britain, who led the people of Britain into revolt against the Roman Imperium, and was ultimately defeated, but for a few years led the people of Britannia to a great victory. She was a Celtic queen, she was a druid, and embodied the energy of very ancient Celtic spirituality. One thing I just want to say before turning it over to Ruth for final music, and then Banafshé will give us our benediction today. I want to just note that we're involved in something now far more consequential than what happened at 9/11. And that is that our climate over the last months has begun to shift state. So this isn't just a pinpoint attack on the heart of America. This is a shift of state of the entire planetary ecology. As we accelerate toward 2 degrees rise above pre-industrial levels, and we've now passed 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And if you know anything about planetary history, there are multiple times in the planetary past when CO2 and global warming come together at that 2 degrees centigrade and 400 parts per million, everything changes. And we are now in the tipping point. Just imagine in your minds as we close today that we're all in the World Trade Tower, and the World Trade Tower is now starting to shake. That's what's happening to our planet. And at the essence of what we all have to take in is that our governments are no longer capable of ensuring stability in the face of rising and increasingly lethal ecological turbulence. And we see this all over the world. So that means that we, the people of the world, need to respond to what the Secretary General is telling us, that we've now entered code red for humanity in a very concerted way. And out of all these discussions has come the Global Regeneration Corps as a global gathering, because as the climate shifts state, so does the progressive movement. And the one mission, we have one mission left for humanity in the face of code red. And that is, we all have to come together at a higher strategic formation. We have to transcend and include for the first time. If you look at the progressive movement, up to this point, we've been doing incredibly good work, but we've almost all been doing it independently of one another. The only option left, the only mission left, is to come together in a higher order formation around the common purpose of creating an Indra's net of regeneration around the world. And that's what the Global Regeneration Corps is doing. And in the last, I would say, 6 weeks, hundreds and thousands of organizations are starting to coalesce under the umbrella of the Global Regeneration Corps. And it's one of the most extraordinary experiences that I've ever had. And I've had a few great adventures, as you all know, to feel the energy of people starting to respond to code red, a planetary 9/11, by just transcending and including at a level that we've never done before. And we're going to be talking a lot more about that, because Ubiquity, Humanity Rising, the Wisdom School, and all of our partners are beginning to come together in this higher order strategic formation. We have a website that we're going to be bringing up over the next couple of days that Banafshe and Katie and Shelley and others have been preparing, and we'll be sending out a special communication to all of you as to how you can be involved. But I want to just note what Ann Waters said. that it's this response to 9/11, this localization movement. Well, and that's the same impulse for the Global Regeneration Corps, the creation of thousands of pods of what we're calling regeneration first responders, doing local regeneration, but within a global network. That's the key to the solution that we all seek. So as we commemorate 9/11, everyone, let us know that we're in another one. And this one's bigger. And the shock waves are going to dwarf what actually happened 20 years ago. And we're all in it. And the only way that we can make it through and not only survive what's coming, but thrive is to come together in a strategic formation, like a flock of birds or a shoal of fish of one mind, code red, Indra's net of regeneration, pods of regeneration first responders all over the world as we move into the next phase of planetary history and development. So that's just a few words on what we're up to here at Ubiquity. It's an incredibly exciting time because the key, my friends, the key is to understand that every crisis is an opportunity. So you find a crisis like 9/11, it was the opportunity, as Anne shared, for us to reach out in reconciliation and forgiveness. Just think how the world would have been changed if we'd have taken that path. And here now, as we face code red, we have another opportunity for the movement to come together in a high order strategic formation. Let us embrace this opportunity together, and we will change the world. So thank you everyone today. And now we'll close out with some music with our dear Ruth, and then a final blessing from Banafshe. Ruth?
This world of two gardens, both so beautiful, says Rumi. This world of two gardens, both so beautiful. This world where in a street a funeral is passing by. From gardens to the gardener, from grieving to a wedding feast. We tremble like leaves about to let go. There's no avoiding pain or feeling exiled or the taste of dust. But we also have the green-winged longing for the sweetness of the friend. Let's make the journey home. Let's make the journey home with love, with compassion, with grace protecting. May each and every one of us remember our creative agency in this time of code red and come together holding hands with open hearts, believing in our creative powers to change the trajectory of our world. Thank you so much. So much love to you.
Thank you, Banafshe. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again October 10th here on the Chartres monthly community call. Bye for now.